The day the world ended did not arrive with thunder or warning. It came quietly, wrapped in an ordinary afternoon, sunlight spilling gently across the floor as if nothing in the universe had shifted. I remember the warmth of that light more than anything else, how it touched the edges of the room, how it softened the silence, how it made everything seem safe. I was smiling. That is what haunts me the most. I was smiling. The phone had rung just moments before, its sharp sound cutting through the stillness of the house. I picked it up without thinking, pressing it to my ear as I leaned against the kitchen counter. The voice on the other end was familiar, comforting, something that pulled me into a conversation I didn't realize would cost me everything. I laughed softly at something they said, my eyes drifting aimlessly around the room, never settling, never searching. I remember twirling a strand of my hair, shifting my weight from one foot to another, completely unaware of the seconds slipping past me like grains of sand I would never gather again. Behind me, the door to the backyard had been left slightly open. I can still see it now in my mind, the thin gap, the quiet invitation, the unnoticed danger. The air moved through it in slow breaths, carrying with it the faint scent of water and the distant hum of the outside world. It was such a small thing, such an insignificant detail, and yet it became the line between before and after. He was there, my baby, my little boy whose laughter had filled every corner of my life, whose tiny hands had only just begun to explore the world beyond my arms. He was on the floor, moving forward in that clumsy, determined way babies do when they are discovering movement for the first time. His knees pressed against the cool tiles, his fingers gripping and releasing as he pulled himself along. There was curiosity in every motion, innocence in every breath. I did not see him. I was still smiling into the phone, my voice light, my mind elsewhere, my heart unaware of the fragile moment unraveling just behind me. I remember turning slightly, not enough to notice, not enough to care, just enough to shift the angle of the sunlight across the room. The conversation carried me further away, wrapping around my attention like a gentle trap. I nodded at words that were not even spoken in front of me, laughed again, softer this time. And then there was silence. Not the kind of silence that soothes, not the quiet that comforts, but a hollow, unnatural stillness that seemed to swallow the air itself. It was so sudden, so complete, that even through the distraction of the call, something inside me stirred. I paused mid-sentence, my smile fading just slightly, my eyes narrowing as if trying to understand something I could not yet see. "Hello," the voice on the other end said, distant now, fading into something unimportant. I turned. The room looked the same. The sunlight was still there, the shadows unchanged, the air unmoving, but he was gone. At first, my mind refused to understand. It was such a simple absence, such a small space where he had been just moments ago. I blinked, as if he might reappear, as if this were some trick of light or memory. My heart had not yet begun to race. My breath had not yet caught in my throat. There was only confusion, a soft, creeping unease that I tried to ignore. I took a step forward, the phone still pressed to my ear, though I no longer heard anything. My eyes moved quickly now, scanning the floor, the corners, the edges of the room. His toys were there, scattered exactly as he had left them. The blanket lay crumpled where he had been playing. Everything was exactly the same, except for him. That was when I noticed the door. It was open wider now, just slightly, just enough to let in more light, more air, more possibility. My heart stuttered then, a sudden, violent movement in my chest that made my breath catch. I don't remember dropping the phone, but I must have, because suddenly my hands were empty and my body was moving. I called his name. Once, softly, as if he might answer with a giggle from somewhere nearby. Then again, louder, sharper, the sound breaking against the walls of the house. There was no answer. The world seemed to narrow into a single line leading from where I stood to that open door. Every step I took felt heavier than the last, as if the ground itself were trying to hold me back, as if something deep within me already knew what I was about to see and was begging me not to look. But I looked. The backyard stretched out before me, bright and still, the pool shimmering under the afternoon sun like a sheet of glass. For a moment, everything was beautiful, too beautiful. The water reflected the sky so perfectly that it seemed unreal, like something painted rather than something that could take, that could steal. And then I saw it. A ripple. Just a small disturbance in the otherwise perfect surface, barely noticeable, something that could have been caused by the wind, by a falling leaf, by anything at all. But there was no wind. There were no leaves. There was only that ripple, widening slowly, silently, as if it were expanding into every part of my life at once. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I don't remember running, but I know I did. I don't remember breathing, but I must have been gasping for air that refused to fill my lungs. The distance between me and the pool felt endless, every second stretching into something unbearable. I reached the edge. And the world stopped. The world stopped, but my body did not. For a fraction of a second, I stood frozen at the edge of the pool, my eyes locked onto the trembling surface as if it might speak, as if it might give me something, anything, to deny what my heart had already begun to understand. The sunlight danced on the water, mocking me with its beauty, turning something so cruel into something that looked almost peaceful. My reflection stared back at me, distorted, broken by the ripples that were slowly fading into stillness. No, the word left my lips as a whisper, fragile and useless. Then I saw him. It was not clear at first. Just a shape beneath the surface, something pale and small, something that did not belong in that quiet, shimmering blue. My breath shattered in my chest. The world roared back to life all at once, too loud, too fast, too late. I screamed his name. I don't remember taking off my shoes. I don't remember dropping to my knees or diving forward. One moment I was standing there, and the next, the cold water swallowed me whole. It wrapped around my body like a shock, stealing the air from my lungs, stealing the warmth from my skin. But I didn't feel it, not really. All I felt was the desperate, burning need to reach him. My hands searched blindly at first, cutting through the water in frantic, uncoordinated movements. My eyes stung, my vision blurred, but I forced them open, forced myself to see, to find him, to not lose even one more second. And then my fingers touched something. Soft. Still. Too still. I grabbed him, pulling him toward me with a strength I didn't know I had, lifting his small body out of the water as I pushed myself back toward the surface. My head broke through first, a violent gasp tearing through my chest as air finally rushed in. I clutched him tightly against me, his weight in my arms both familiar and terrifyingly wrong. Please, please. I was begging, though I didn't know who I was begging. I dragged us both out of the pool, my body heavy, my limbs shaking, every movement clumsy with panic. The ground burned against my knees as I collapsed onto the concrete, pulling him fully out of the water, laying him down in front of me. His clothes clung to his skin, his hair plastered to his forehead, his tiny chest unmoving. No. No, no, no. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. I touched his face with trembling hands, brushing water away from his eyes, his nose, his mouth. His skin was cold, colder than it should have been, colder than anything I had ever felt on him before. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt, each beat echoing in my ears like a countdown I couldn't stop. Wake up, baby, please wake up. My voice broke into pieces as I shook him gently, then harder, then desperately, as if I could force life back into him through sheer will. But he didn't move. He didn't cry. He didn't even breathe. The silence was unbearable. I had never known silence like that before. Even in the quietest moments of my life, there had always been something, a breath, a heartbeat, a presence. But now there was nothing. Just an empty, suffocating stillness that pressed in on me from all sides. My hands moved without thinking, guided by something I didn't even know I remembered. I placed one on his tiny chest, the other supporting his head, trying to recall the things I had once read, the things I had once thought I would never need. My mind was a storm of panic and disbelief, but somewhere beneath it, a fragile thread of action held on. Please, please breathe. I pressed down gently, then again, counting without knowing if I was counting right, my voice shaking, my vision blurred by tears that wouldn't stop falling. Water dripped from my hair onto his face, mixing with my tears, with the droplets that clung to his lashes. "Come back, please come back." I leaned down, pressing my mouth to his, trying to give him air, trying to give him life, trying to undo the seconds that had already stolen so much. My breath came in broken gasps between attempts, my chest aching, my arms trembling, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Time lost all meaning. Seconds felt like hours. Hours felt like nothing at all. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a sound, faint at first, then growing louder. Voices, footsteps, a door slamming, but they were far away, distant, unimportant. The only thing that mattered was him. The only thing that existed was the small, still body beneath my hands. "Help, someone help." I didn't even realize I was screaming until my throat burned with it. Hands touched my shoulders, pulling at me, voices calling out words I couldn't understand. I shook them off, refusing to let go, refusing to let anyone take him away from me. They didn't understand. No one understood. He needed me. He needed me to keep going, to not stop, to not give up. "Ma'am, please." "No," I screamed, my voice raw, desperate, unrecognizable even to myself. "He's fine. He's going to be fine. Just let me." But my hands were pulled away. Strong arms lifted him from the ground, careful but urgent, as someone else tried to hold me back. I fought against them, my body thrashing, my mind refusing to accept what was happening. "Give him back. Please give him back." The world became chaos, voices overlapping, movements too fast to follow, everything spinning out of control. I caught glimpses of faces, of uniforms, of hands moving quickly, efficiently, doing what I could not. They worked on him there on the ground, their expressions focused, serious, their voices steady in a way mine could never be. I watched, helpless, broken, my hands empty, my heart shattering with every second that passed. "Come on, little guy, stay with us." Their words blurred together, fading in and out as if I were drifting away from reality itself. I wanted to reach him, to hold him, to tell him I was there, that I wasn't going anywhere, that I would never let anything happen to him again. But I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I could only watch. And pray. I had never prayed like that before. Not with words, not with structure, but with everything I was, everything I had, everything I would ever be. I offered it all in that moment, every piece of my soul laid bare in a desperate, silent plea. Just let him breathe. Just let him open his eyes. Just let me hear his voice one more time. The sirens came then, cutting through the air with a sharp, piercing sound that seemed to split the world in two. Red and blue lights flashed against the walls, against the water, against my tear-streaked face. More people arrived, more hands, more voices, more urgency. They lifted him onto a stretcher. They began to move. And I followed, stumbling, falling, rising again, my legs barely holding me, my vision darkening at the edges. Someone guided me, supported me, kept me moving even when I felt like collapsing into nothing. "He's going to be okay," a voice said beside me. I clung to those words, as if they were the only thing keeping me alive. He's going to be okay. He has to be. Because if he is. No. I couldn't think that. I wouldn't think that. They loaded him into the ambulance, the doors closing with a final, heavy sound that echoed through my chest. I climbed in after him, my hands reaching for him, finding his small fingers, wrapping around them as if I could anchor him to me, as if I could keep him from slipping away. "Stay with me," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the noise around us. "I'm here, I'm right here." The ambulance doors shut, and the world outside disappeared. The ambulance moved, but time did not. Or maybe it was the other way around. Time raced forward without mercy while I remained trapped in a single moment that refused to end. The sound of the siren filled every inch of the space, loud and relentless, yet it felt distant, like it belonged to someone else's life. Everything felt distant except him. He lay there, so small against the stretcher, surrounded by hands that moved quickly, purposefully, doing things I couldn't fully understand. Tubes, masks, wires, things that did not belong near him, things that made him look fragile in a way I had never seen before. His chest still wasn't moving the way it should. Or maybe it was faintly, weakly. I couldn't tell. My eyes refused to blink, afraid that even that brief darkness might take something away from me. Please, I whispered again, though I didn't know who I was speaking to anymore. One of the paramedics glanced at me, his expression controlled, almost gentle, but there was something behind it, something that made my stomach twist. Not hopelessness, not yet, but urgency, seriousness, a weight that pressed down on the air between us. How long was he in the water? He asked. The question hit me like a blow. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out at first. My mind scrambled backward, trying to piece together the moments I had carelessly let slip away. The phone call, the laughter, the silence, the open door, the ripple in the water. Seconds. Minutes. I didn't know. I don't know. My voice trembled violently. Just a moment, I think I didn't. The words collapsed before they could form. I didn't know. I didn't know, and that not knowing felt like a crime I could never undo. He nodded, not pushing, but I could feel the importance of the answer lingering in the air, heavy and unspoken. They continued working, pressing, adjusting, watching. Every movement was measured, practiced, but to me, it felt like chaos barely held together by thin threads of control. I watched their hands as if they held the power to rewrite what had already happened. I squeezed his fingers gently. They were so small in my hand. Do you hear me? I whispered, leaning closer, my voice breaking into pieces. Mama's here, I'm right here, you're okay. You're going to be okay. I didn't know if I was trying to convince him or myself. The ride felt endless, yet too short at the same time. I wasn't ready for it to end because I didn't know what waited at the other side. Hospitals had always been places of healing in my mind, places where things got better. But now, they felt like something else entirely, a place where answers lived, and I was terrified of what those answers might be. The ambulance slowed. The siren faded. The sudden quiet was almost unbearable. Then the doors flew open. Bright light flooded in, harsh and unforgiving, washing over everything. Voices called out instructions, quick and precise. Hands moved again, lifting the stretcher, guiding it out. I followed without thinking, my legs unsteady, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might tear through my chest. Clear the way. Get pediatrics ready. Possible drowning, unresponsive. Words, so many words. Each one struck me like a stone, heavy and impossible to ignore. Unresponsive. The word echoed in my mind over and over until it drowned out everything else. Unresponsive. No. He would respond. He had to. We moved through corridors that blurred together into long, endless lines of white and gray. Lights passed overhead in a steady rhythm, each one marking another second slipping away. I tried to keep up, tried not to lose sight of him, afraid that if I did, even for a moment, he might disappear completely. Then, suddenly, they stopped. Doors swung open, and he was taken inside. I tried to follow, but a hand caught my arm, firm but not unkind. Ma'am, you need to wait here. No, I said immediately, shaking my head, trying to pull free. No, I need to be with him. He needs me. They're doing everything they can, the voice said gently but firmly. Please, let them work. Everything they can. The words felt both comforting and terrifying. I stood there just outside the door, my eyes fixed on the small window that offered only glimpses of movement inside. Shadows passed back and forth. Figures leaned over him. Machines were brought in. More voices, more urgency. But I couldn't hear anything clearly anymore. It was as if I had been placed behind glass, separated from the world by something invisible but impenetrable. My hands pressed against the door, my forehead resting against the cool surface, my breath fogging the small window as I tried to see, to understand, to hold on to something real. Please, I whispered again. I had said that word so many times now that it had lost its meaning. Yet it was the only thing I had left. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. I couldn't tell. Time had broken. At some point, my legs gave out beneath me, and I sank into the chair nearby without even realizing how I got there. My hands trembled uncontrollably in my lap, my clothes still damp, clinging to my skin, a constant reminder of what had happened, of what I had allowed to happen. My phone was gone. I didn't know where it was. I didn't care. Nothing outside that room mattered anymore. Nothing existed except the small life on the other side of that door. I thought of his first smile. The way his eyes would light up when he saw me, as if I were the entire world to him. The soft sounds he made when he was half asleep, the way his tiny fingers would curl around mine without thinking. Every memory came rushing in at once, overwhelming, beautiful, unbearable. Had I really only looked away for a moment? Had it really been that simple? That fragile? A sob tore through my chest, sudden and uncontrollable. I covered my mouth with my hands, trying to hold it in, but it only made it worse. The sound escaped anyway, broken and raw, echoing faintly in the sterile hallway. Footsteps approached. I didn't look up. I couldn't. I didn't want to see anyone's face, didn't want to read anything in their eyes. I didn't want comfort, didn't want sympathy, didn't want anything that suggested this was real. But the footsteps stopped in front of me. And I knew. I don't know how I knew, but something inside me went still, completely still, like the moment before a storm breaks, like the breath before a fall. "Ma'am." The voice was soft. Too soft. I lifted my head slowly, my vision blurred by tears, my heart pounding in a way that felt wrong, uneven, desperate. The doctor stood there, his expression carefully composed, but his eyes told me everything before he said a single word. "No," I shook my head immediately before he could speak, before he could confirm the thing I was already beginning to understand. "No, you're wrong, you have to be wrong, he's just tired, he's going to wake up." I stood up too quickly, the room spinning around me, my hands reaching out as if I could push the words back into his mouth, as if I could stop them from ever being spoken. "Please don't say it." My voice broke completely. "Please." And in that moment, I realized something I had never understood before. Sometimes, the world doesn't end with a loud crash. Sometimes, it ends with a single sentence. "I'm sorry, we did everything we could." There are moments in life when words stop being sounds and become something else entirely. Something heavy, something sharp, something that cuts deeper than anything physical ever could. That sentence did not reach my ears the way ordinary words do. It went straight through me, like it already knew where to hurt the most. I remember staring at the doctor, waiting for something to change, waiting for him to correct himself, waiting for someone to step out of that room and say there had been a mistake, that everything was fine, that my baby was crying and asking for me. But nothing changed. The hallway remained the same, cold, quiet, mercilessly still. The lights overhead hummed faintly, as if the world had chosen to continue without even acknowledging what had just been taken from me. People moved in the distance, their footsteps echoing softly, their lives intact, untouched. "How?" The word barely formed on my lips. It wasn't even a question, not really. It was disbelief, denial, a desperate attempt to reject the reality standing in front of me. The doctor's expression softened, but it didn't help. Nothing could have helped in that moment. "He was without oxygen for too long," he said gently, each word measured, careful, as if they were afraid to break me further. Too long. Those two words wrapped around my heart and squeezed until I could hardly breathe. Too long, how long was too long? A minute? 2? 5? I tried to go back to count the seconds I had wasted, the moments I had given away so carelessly, but my mind refused to cooperate. It blurred everything together into one unbearable truth. I wasn't there. "I was right there," I whispered, shaking my head slowly, my voice trembling under the weight of what I was beginning to understand. "I was in the house, I was just on the phone." On the phone. The words tasted bitter, foreign, like they belonged to someone else, someone careless, someone I didn't recognize. But they were mine. This was my story, my mistake, My moment of distraction that had turned into something irreversible. The doctor said something else, something about procedures, about paperwork, about giving me time, but I didn't hear him. I couldn't. My ears rang with a hollow, endless echo, drowning out everything except the pounding of my own heart. Or maybe it wasn't my heart. Maybe it was the absence of his. Can I? My voice broke again, barely holding together. Can I see him? There was a pause. A small, almost invisible hesitation that felt like another wound. Of course, he said finally, stepping aside, gesturing toward the door. My legs felt weak as I moved forward, each step heavier than the last. The door that had once separated me from hope now stood as a barrier between me and something else, something final, something I wasn't ready to face. But I had to. I pushed it open slowly. The room inside was quieter than I expected. No frantic movement, no urgent voices, no rushing footsteps. Everything had settled into a stillness that felt unnatural, like time itself had decided to stop out of respect, or maybe indifference. He was there, on the bed. So small, so still. For a moment, I couldn't move. I stood at the doorway, my hand still gripping the edge of the door, my breath shallow and uneven. He looked the same, and yet completely different. His face was peaceful, almost as if he were sleeping, but there was something missing. Something invisible, something essential. Life. No, the word slipped out again, softer this time, almost like a broken echo of what I had said before. I walked toward him slowly, afraid that if I moved too quickly, he might disappear. My hands trembled as I reached out, hovering just above him for a moment before finally touching his cheek. Cold. Not the gentle coolness of sleep. Not the warmth that I had known so well. This was different. This was wrong. I pulled my hand back slightly, as if I had been burned, my breath catching painfully in my throat. But then I forced myself to touch him again, to accept it, to feel it, because turning away would mean accepting something I wasn't ready to accept. I'm here, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Mama's here. The words felt empty now. Meaningless. He didn't respond. He didn't move. He didn't even breathe. I sat down beside him, my knees weak, my body heavy with a grief that felt too big to fit inside me. My fingers found his hand, wrapping around it gently, just like I had done so many times before. It fit perfectly, just as it always had. But this time, it didn't hold back. There was no tiny squeeze in return, no unconscious response, no connection. Just stillness. I'm sorry. The words came out in a rush, broken and desperate. I'm so sorry, I didn't see, I didn't know, I was right there and I didn't see. Tears fell freely now, landing on his hand, his arm, the blanket beneath him. I didn't try to stop them. There was no point. There was nothing left to hold together. I should have been watching you. I should have been with you. I should have. The sentence shattered before it could finish. There were too many should-haves. Too many things I could have done differently. Too many moments I would never get back. I leaned forward, pressing my forehead gently against his, closing my eyes as if I could somehow bring us back to a moment before all of this, a moment where everything was still okay, where the world had not yet fallen apart. Please come back, I whispered again, even though I knew. Somewhere deep inside me, I knew. This wasn't like before. This wasn't a moment that could be undone with enough effort, enough love, enough pleading. This was final. And that word, final, settled into my chest like something permanent, something that would never leave, something that would live with me for the rest of my life. I stayed there for a long time. I don't know how long. Time had lost all meaning. Minutes, hours, it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the small, silent space between us that could never be filled again. At some point, someone entered the room. I heard the door open softly, footsteps approaching, a quiet voice saying something I couldn't understand. But I didn't move. I didn't respond. Because if I moved, if I let go, if I stepped away from him, even for a second, Then it would become real, in a way I could never escape. So I held on, even as everything else slipped away. The room did not change, but I did. That is what grief does. It does not always arrive as a wave. Sometimes it arrives as silence that slowly rearranges everything inside you until you are no longer the same person who walked in. I stayed beside him, my hand still wrapped around his, but something in me had begun to fracture in ways I could not name. At some point, a nurse gently placed a glass of water near me. I remember noticing it without understanding why it was there. My throat was dry, burning, but I didn't drink. I couldn't. Even the smallest normal action felt like betrayal, like stepping out of a world that no longer existed. "Ma'am," a voice said softly beside me. I didn't look up. Not because I was ignoring them, but because I was afraid that if I acknowledged anyone else, even for a second, I would lose him again. As if my attention alone was what kept him here. As if love could reverse what had already happened. The voice tried again, gentler this time, but I still did not move. Eventually, I heard footsteps retreat. The room returned to its fragile quiet. I leaned closer to him again, studying his face as if I could find something hidden there. Some sign, some mistake, some reason to believe this was not the end. His eyelashes rested softly against his cheeks. His lips were slightly parted. He looked peaceful in a way that made the truth feel even more unbearable. Peace should not look like this. Peace should not feel like absence. "I was only gone for a moment," I whispered, not to anyone in particular, just to the air, to the memory, to the impossible. My mind tried to reconstruct the day again. It kept going back, looping endlessly like a broken reel. The phone call. The laughter. The way I had smiled without thinking. The sound of my own voice, so careless, so unaware. And then the open door. Every detail now felt sharpened, painful, impossible to escape. I could see it all too clearly, as if my memory had turned against me, forcing me to witness every second I had failed him. "I didn't hear you," I said quietly, my fingers brushing his tiny knuckles. "I didn't hear anything. I should have heard you." But the house had been quiet. Too quiet. And I had mistaken silence for safety. A sound escaped me then, something between a sob and a breath, and I pressed my forehead to his hand, holding it tighter, as if pressure alone could hold him here. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. A doctor returned at some point. I remember the sound of papers, the low murmur of conversation near the door, the careful way people spoke when they believed the person in the room could not bear more truth. They were right. I could not bear it. But it came anyway. "We need to complete some formalities," someone said gently. The words did not land properly at first. Formalities. A word that belonged to offices, to documents, to ordinary life. It felt wrong in that room, beside him, beside something so deeply unordinary. I finally lifted my head slightly. What does that mean?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. No one answered immediately. That silence told me enough. My grip on his hand tightened instinctively, panic rising again like it had in the water, like it had in the ambulance, like it had every time reality tried to take him further away from me. "No," I said quickly, shaking my head. "No, I'm not leaving him." "It's just paperwork, ma'am," the nurse said softly. "You can come back." Come back. The phrase struck something fragile inside me. Come back. As if I could step away from him and return to find him still here. As if anything about this moment could be temporary. I looked down at him again. His hand in mine. Still. Small. Forever unchanged. Something inside me broke quietly. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that felt like the final thread snapping loose. I nodded without meaning to. I don't even remember deciding. Someone guided me gently out of the chair. I stood unsteadily, my legs weak as if they no longer belonged to me. For a moment, I couldn't let go of him. My fingers stayed wrapped around his for too long, resisting the pull of everything else in the room. "I'll be right back," I whispered to him. The words felt wrong the moment I said them, because I didn't know if I was lying to him or to myself. Eventually, I let go. That was the moment I will never forget. My hand separating from his. A space forming between us that no longer felt temporary. I stepped back slowly, my eyes still locked on him, refusing to blink, refusing to accept distance. The door felt far away, even though it was only a few steps. Each step away from him felt like losing him again. When I finally reached the hallway, the light felt different. Too bright, too alive. People moved past me, speaking, walking, existing in a way that felt impossible. I stood there holding a pen I did not remember taking, staring at papers I did not understand. My name was asked. I signed it. I don't remember writing anything. Only the feeling of my hand moving without me. When it was over, I was guided back. Back to him. But something had changed. The room felt quieter than before, heavier, as if it now knew what I had accepted outside it, as if even the air had changed its shape. I walked to his side again and sat down slowly. He was still there. Still him. But something in me understood now that nothing I did would ever change that stillness. I took his hand again. It still fit perfectly in mine. "I'm here," I whispered, though it no longer felt like a promise. It felt like memory. I stayed beside him long after the room had emptied. At some point, the staff stopped moving around so much. The urgency faded into quiet professionalism and then into distance. People came and went, speaking in soft tones, closing doors gently, as if noise itself had become something inappropriate in his presence. But I remained where I was, as if my body had forgotten how to leave. Time no longer felt like something I could measure. It stretched and collapsed at the same time. The light outside the window changed without meaning, brighter, dimmer, warmer, colder, but I could not tell if it was minutes passing or hours. All I knew was him. Still there. Still silent. Still impossibly far from me, even though I was right beside him. At some point, a woman in a white coat returned. I remember her voice more than her face. It was soft, careful, the kind of voice people use when they are afraid of breaking something already shattered. "Ma'am, we need to prepare him now." The words didn't fully enter my mind at first. I stared at her, trying to understand why she was speaking in that tone, why she was standing closer than before, why her hands were folded in front of her as if she was waiting for permission. "Prepare him." My chest tightened immediately. "No," I said quickly, shaking my head. "No, he's here, he's still here." Her expression changed slightly, just a flicker of sadness she tried to hide. "I understand," she said gently, "but we have to proceed." Proceed. Another word that did not belong in this room. I looked down at him again, my hand instinctively finding his once more. His fingers were still small, still soft in shape, but the warmth I had always known was no longer there. That absence was the only thing I could focus on. It made everything else feel unreal, like I was standing inside a memory instead of a moment. "Can I stay?" I asked suddenly, my voice breaking halfway through. The question came out of desperation, not logic, as if staying could change anything, as if my presence could anchor him to something that had already let go. The woman hesitated. "Just for a little while," she said softly. A little while. I didn't know how to measure that anymore. When they began, I didn't understand what they were doing at first. There were gentle movements, careful handling, quiet coordination between people who had done this before and wished they didn't have to do it again. They worked with respect, with a kind of quiet dignity that made it even harder to watch. I stayed close. Too close. My hand never left his. At one point, someone gently tried to guide me back a little, but I pulled away instinctively. "No," I said again, weaker this time. "I'm fine here." No one argued with me after that. They let me stay. And I wish I could say that it helped. But all it did was make me see everything more clearly than I ever wanted to. I watched as they spoke quietly among themselves. I watched as they checked things I didn't want to understand. I watched as the room slowly became less about urgency and more about completion. And through it all, I kept talking to him. "I'm here," I whispered again and again, like repetition could build a bridge back to him. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." But the truth was already spreading inside me like cold water. I was there, and it still didn't matter. At some point, one of the nurses gently placed a blanket over him. It was small, white, neat, the kind of gesture meant to preserve dignity, to offer softness where nothing else could be offered. But when I saw it, something inside me collapsed again. "No," I whispered, my grip tightening. "He doesn't need that. He's okay without it." My voice sounded distant, even to myself. The nurse paused, looking at me with eyes that were full of something I didn't want to recognize. "I know," she said quietly. But she didn't remove the blanket. Because some things, once done, cannot be undone. I sat there watching, feeling the weight of reality settle deeper into my bones. It was no longer a sudden shock. It was something slow, something creeping, something that was becoming part of me whether I accepted it or not. At some point, I realized I wasn't crying loudly anymore. I was just still. Tears kept falling, but silently now, like they had exhausted themselves. My fingers remained wrapped around his hand. I had stopped counting how long I had been holding it. I didn't want to stop. Letting go felt like the only real ending I could control, and I refused to choose it. Outside the window, life continued. A bird landed on a railing and flew away. A tree moved gently in the wind. Somewhere far away, a car passed. All of it felt wrong, incomplete, as if the world had failed to notice that something essential had been removed from it. Eventually, the doctor returned. He did not speak immediately. He just stood at a distance for a moment, watching, as if giving me space I no longer knew how to use. Then he said softly, "You can spend a little more time with him." A little more time. Again that word. Little. As if love could be measured in minutes now. As if goodbye could be softened by fractions. I nodded without looking at him. He left again, and I was alone with my baby once more. I leaned closer, resting my forehead near his hand again, closing my eyes for a moment that I didn't want to end. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though the words felt too small for what I meant. "I didn't protect you, I didn't see you, I did." My voice broke. I couldn't finish. Because there was no ending to that sentence that didn't destroy me. The room stayed quiet. And for the first time, I understood something I didn't want to understand. This wasn't a moment I was going to wake up from. It was the life I had to learn how to survive. I stopped thinking of time, something moving forward after that. It became something I was trapped inside. The room, the bed, his stillness, they all merged into one unchanging reality that I could not step out of. Even my own body felt distant, like it belonged to someone else who was only watching me from far away. I remember sitting there with his hand still in mine, my fingers refusing to loosen their grip, as if letting go would confirm something I was not ready to accept. The silence had a weight now. Not empty silence anymore, but full of everything I could not undo. At some point, someone brought a chair closer to me, though I did not notice when it was placed. I only realized I was sitting when my body sank into it without permission. My eyes never left him. They couldn't. Every blink felt like a risk, like I might miss something important, like I might lose even the illusion of him being there. A soft knock came at the door. I didn't turn. I didn't want anyone else entering this space. I didn't want voices that didn't belong to him. But still, someone entered. I heard the careful steps first. Slow, respectful. Then a pause near the doorway, as if the person was deciding whether to come closer or not. "It's time," a voice said gently. Time. That word again. It didn't mean anything anymore. I shook my head immediately, still not looking up. "No," I said quietly. "Not yet." There was a pause. No one responded right away. In that silence, I felt something shift again inside me, not breaking this time, but settling, like something heavy sinking to the bottom of a deep place where it could no longer float. The voice tried again, softer. You can stay a little longer, but we will need to move him soon. Move him. That phrase made my chest tighten. Move him where? I asked, finally looking up. The person standing there did not answer immediately, and I understood without being told. My grip on his hand tightened again instinctively. No, I whispered, my voice shaking. No, he's not going anywhere. He's right here. But even as I said it, I felt how fragile it sounded, how impossible. A nurse stepped closer slowly, her presence gentle, careful not to overwhelm me. He will always be with you, she said softly. I almost laughed at that. Not because it was funny, but because it hurt in a way I couldn't hold inside. No, I said again, weaker now. No, that's not the same. I leaned forward, pressing his hand closer to my face, as if I could somehow absorb him back into me. I just need a little more time, I whispered. Just a little more. The room did not respond. It never did. At some point, I don't remember when, they began to prepare again. Not quickly, not harshly, but slowly, like everything they did now was wrapped in caution, as if even movement could cause more damage than had already been done. I watched them, but I didn't really see them. My world was still centered on his hand in mine. Still small. Still familiar. Still the only thing that felt real. Do you want to hold him? Someone asked gently. The question took a moment to reach me. Hold him. I looked up slowly, my mind struggling to process the idea. They were already preparing to lift him carefully. My breath caught. Yes, I said immediately, too quickly. Yes, I want to. My voice broke again before I could finish. They helped me carefully. I don't remember the exact movements, only the overwhelming fear that something would slip, something would break further than it already had. And then he was in my arms. Small. Still. So unbearably light. The weight of him should have felt familiar. I had held him so many times before, but this was different. This weight carried silence inside it. It carried absence. Still, I held him tightly against me. My forehead rested against his. For a moment, I closed my eyes. And I let myself pretend. Just for a second. That he was sleeping. That he would wake up any moment. That I would feel his small breath against my chest again, soft and warm, like he always used to. I'm here, I whispered into his hair. Mama's here. My voice trembled. I won't leave you. But even as I said it, I knew I already had. Not now. But in the moment, I looked away. In the moment, I smiled on that phone call. In the moment, I believed silence meant safety. Tears fell onto his tiny shoulder, soaking into the fabric that no longer carried warmth. I'm sorry, I said again, over and over, because it was the only thing left I could offer. I'm so sorry. The room stayed quiet. No one interrupted. No one told me to stop. Because there was nothing left to interrupt anymore. Eventually, gently, they asked me to let them take him. I didn't want to. Every part of me resisted. But my arms were no longer obeying me the way they used to. Slowly, painfully, I loosened my hold. It felt like losing him again. And again. And again. When they finally lifted him away, I didn't move. I couldn't. My arms stayed in the same position, empty now, still shaped around something that was no longer there. I stared at that emptiness for a long time. As if I could understand it. As if I could accept it. But I couldn't. I just sat there. In the quiet. In the aftermath. In the part of life where nothing would ever be the same again. After they took him, the room did not feel emptier. It felt wrong. As if something essential had been removed from the air itself, not just from my arms. I stayed in the same position for a long time, My hands still slightly curved the way they had been when I was holding him, as if my body had not received the message yet. People spoke near me, but their words passed through like wind. Do you have someone we can call? Do you want some water? We can give you a moment. Moments. Everything was still being offered in small pieces, as if my life could be fixed in fragments. I didn't answer at first. I couldn't. My eyes stayed fixed on the empty space in front of me, where he had been. That space felt louder than any voice in the room. Eventually, I heard my own voice, but it sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. Where did you take him? A pause followed. A careful one. He is in a peaceful place, someone said gently. Peaceful. The word made something twist inside me. I stood up slowly, unsteady, as if my legs were learning how to exist again without carrying him. The chair scraped faintly behind me, but I barely noticed. My body moved before my mind agreed. I want to see him, I said. There was hesitation. Not refusal, but sadness. You can, but it may be better to rest first. Rest. That word felt impossible, too. I shook my head immediately. No. The answer was simple, final. Because rest meant distance, and I couldn't survive more distance. They guided me through a different hallway this time. Quieter, colder. The walls seemed less alive here. The lights dimmer, the air heavier. Every step felt like I was walking deeper into something I could never walk back out of. I didn't ask where we were going. I already knew. When the door opened, I stopped. The room inside was still. Too still. He was there. Not moving. Not surrounded by urgency anymore. No machines. No voices. Just silence and stillness and something final that I did not have a name for. My breath caught instantly. For a moment, I couldn't move forward. My body refused. Because some part of me still believed, still hoped, that if I walked closer, I would see his chest rise, that he would turn his head, that he would open his eyes and look for me the way he always did. But nothing moved. I whispered, though I didn't know what I meant exactly. The nurse beside me didn't rush me. She only said softly, take your time. Time again. I stepped inside slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. He was lying on a small bed, covered neatly now, his face peaceful in a way that no longer felt comforting. It felt distant, like he was somewhere I couldn't reach, no matter how close I stood. I stopped beside him. My hands shook as I reached out again. But this time, I didn't touch him immediately. I just hovered there, afraid, because I remembered how cold he had felt before. And I didn't want to feel that again. Still, I touched his cheek gently. It was the same. No warmth returned. My knees gave out before I even realized it. I sank down beside him, not crying loudly anymore, just breaking quietly, like something inside me had finally run out of strength to resist what it already knew. I looked away for a moment. I whispered. My voice was barely there. A moment. My fingers traced his small hand again, even now, even here, as if muscle memory could refuse reality. I didn't think, I said, shaking my head slowly. I didn't think anything could happen in a moment. My breath trembled. I was laughing. The memory came back sharply. The phone call, my smile, the ease in my voice. I was so happy. My voice cracked. And you were right there. I leaned closer, resting my forehead near his hand again. I should have heard you. Silence answered me. Not empty silence this time. Final silence. The kind that does not respond no matter how many times you speak into it. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Minutes stopped meaning anything. At some point, someone placed a light hand on my shoulder. I didn't react, not because I didn't feel it, but because I couldn't leave him again, even in awareness. We will take care of everything, the voice said softly. Everything. That word felt too large for anything that could ever be taken care of now. I didn't answer, because there was nothing left in me that knew how. I just stayed there, beside him, trying to memorize something that could never leave me. The shape of silence, the weight of loss, and the moment I would spend the rest of my life returning to. After a while, even my tears began to feel distant. Not because the pain was less, but because it had become too constant to keep reacting to. I stayed beside him, my hand still resting near his, as if my body refused to accept that distance was now permanent. The room around me continued to exist, but I no longer felt like I belonged to it. A nurse quietly placed a small cloth near me. I didn't notice when she came or when she left. Everything moved around me like shadows passing through a life I was no longer fully part of. At some point, I heard voices again. Do you have family we can contact? Is there someone who should be informed? We can arrange support for you. Support. That word felt almost unfamiliar. I finally lifted my head slightly. My family, I repeated slowly, as if trying to remember where that word fit in my life. He was my family. The room didn't respond immediately. No one corrected me. No one needed to. Because in that moment, it was true in a way nothing else was. A gentle pause followed, and then someone spoke carefully. We understand, but is there anyone else for you? Anyone else? The question felt far away, like it belonged to another world where people still counted life in groups instead of in absence. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. And after a pause, I added softer, just him. Silence followed again. Not uncomfortable this time. Just heavy. Time passed in fragments I could not hold together. At one point, I noticed the light outside the window had changed again. The day was shifting, slowly moving toward evening. The sky had softened into a pale, fading color that didn't match anything inside me anymore. Inside, everything was stuck at the same moment. The moment I turned. The moment I saw the water. The moment I understood too late. My fingers moved again unconsciously, tracing the edge of the blanket near him. Even covered, even still, I couldn't stop reaching. I was smiling, I whispered suddenly, more to myself than anyone else. I was actually smiling. The memory hit again, sharper this time. My voice on the phone. My laughter. The ease of it. How ordinary everything felt. I pressed my hand against my mouth, trying to hold in what came next, but it broke through anyway. I didn't even feel anything was wrong, I said, shaking my head slightly. Nothing told me. My breath hitched. But he was there. My eyes closed tightly. So close. The word close felt cruel now. Because closeness had not saved him. It had only made the memory more unbearable. A chair was brought near me again, but I didn't sit properly. I stayed half standing, half collapsed, as if I couldn't decide whether my body should continue or stop. At some point, I felt a presence beside me again. The doctor. He didn't speak immediately. Just stood there. Not as a professional this time, but as someone witnessing something they couldn't fix. I am truly sorry, he said quietly. I nodded without looking at him, because I had already heard those words before. And they didn't change anything. After a moment, he added, we will guide you through what happens next. What happens next? That phrase made something inside me tighten again. Because I hadn't thought that far. There was no next in my mind. Only him. Only the room. Only the moment that kept repeating itself like a wound that refused to close. I looked at him again. Not the doctor. Him. Still there. Still my baby. Even if everything else said otherwise. I need to stay, I said quietly. It wasn't a request anymore. It was the only thing I could still hold on to. The doctor hesitated, then nodded slightly. For a while, he said gently. I didn't argue. A while was all I had now. So I stayed, sitting beside him again, my hand near his, breathing slowly, unevenly, as if each breath required permission from a life that had already changed forever. Outside, the world continued moving. But inside that room, everything remained still. And I realized something slowly settling in me, not like acceptance, but like weight. This was not a moment I would return from. This was the place where my life had changed direction. And everything after this would only be learning how to live with what I had lost. I stayed in that room until even the idea of time stopped feeling real. The evening light outside had deepened into something softer, quieter, almost gray. It pressed gently against the window, as if it too understood that it could not disturb what was happening inside. The world beyond that glass still moved, still lived, still continued, but none of it reached me anymore. Inside, everything was reduced to him. And the silence. And me. At some point, a nurse came in again and spoke softly, asking if I wanted anything to eat. I remember looking at her for a long moment without understanding the question. Eat. The word felt foreign, unnecessary, like something that belonged to a different version of my life. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. She didn't push. She only nodded and placed something on a small table nearby anyway, as if routine still mattered in a place like this. After she left, the room returned to its quiet rhythm. Or what passed for rhythm now. I leaned forward again, resting my hands near his, careful not to move anything, careful as if he might still feel discomfort, as if he might still need me to be gentle. My mind refused to fully accept what my eyes already knew, so I continued behaving as if nothing had changed in the deepest part of reality. I keep thinking, I whispered suddenly. My voice sounded tired, broken in a way I hadn't heard before. I keep thinking if I had just turned around 1 second earlier. The sentence stopped, because my mind had already answered it too many times. 1 second earlier. 1 second sooner. 1 second that could have rewritten everything. My fingers curled slightly into the blanket beside him. But I didn't, I said quietly, finishing the thought for myself. I didn't turn. The truth sat there between us. Unmoving. Unforgiving. My eyes stayed fixed on him as I spoke again, softer this time. You were always following me around the house, I said. Always looking for me, always calling. A faint memory came back. His small sounds, his tiny movements, the way he would crawl toward me whenever he saw me, like I was the only place in the world he needed to reach. And I didn't even notice when you were gone. My throat tightened. I didn't even hear you. The words became harder to say after that. Silence filled the space again, but it wasn't peaceful. It was dense, heavy, the kind of silence that presses into your chest and refuses to leave. At some point, I felt movement near the door. More people entering, quiet voices, paper sounds, soft instructions being exchanged. I didn't look up. I couldn't. I didn't want more moments breaking into this one. A voice spoke gently nearby. We will need to prepare for final procedures. Final. That word again. It did something inside me that I couldn't explain. Not breaking this time, not collapsing. Just hollowing. Like something slowly being taken out piece by piece. I tightened my grip on his hand instinctively. No, I said immediately. It wasn't loud. But it was sharp. The room went quiet. I looked up then, slowly. He's already here, I said, my voice shaking. He's right here. A pause. Careful faces. Careful silence. Then someone spoke softly. We are only here to guide you through what needs to be done. What needs to be done? But I couldn't see anything that needed doing. Everything I needed had already been taken from me. In a moment, I didn't notice. I shook my head again, more to myself than anyone else. I don't want him to leave again, I said quietly. The words slipped out before I could stop them. A nurse stepped closer slowly. her expression full of something I couldn't bear to look at for too long. "He will always be with you," she said again, repeating what I had heard before. But this time, I didn't respond, because I finally understood what they meant. And it wasn't what my heart wanted. I stayed where I was, holding his hand, memorizing every detail I could still reach. The shape of his fingers, the stillness of his face, the quiet that now lived where his breath used to be. And for the first time since everything began, I stopped asking for the moment to change. Because somewhere deep inside me, I realized this moment was no longer something I could escape. It was something I would carry for the rest of my life. The night had fully settled by the time I realized I had not moved for a long while. The room had dimmed into a softer version of itself, lights lowered, shadows stretched gently across the floor and walls. Everything felt slower now, quieter in a way that was no longer just silence, but stillness that had settled permanently. I was still beside him, still holding his hand, still unable to understand how the world outside this room could continue. At some point, someone had draped a shawl over my shoulders. I hadn't noticed when it happened. I only became aware of it because my body felt slightly less cold. But even that warmth felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. A nurse stood nearby for a moment, not speaking, just watching with that same careful expression people wore when they didn't know what else to do. "Would you like to step out for a little while?" she asked gently. The question sounded almost unreal. Step out. As if there was still a place I belonged outside this room. I didn't answer immediately. My eyes stayed on him. Because if I looked away, even for a second, it felt like something final would happen again. "I can't leave him," I said finally. My voice was quiet, but firm in its own broken way. The nurse nodded slowly, as if she had expected that answer. "You don't have to leave right now," she said softly. "We are here with you." But I didn't really hear the rest, because I was thinking of something else. Of all the moments before. The ordinary moments. The phone call. My smile. The sound of my own laughter filling a house that I now understood I had not truly been present in. "I keep seeing it," I whispered suddenly. The nurse looked at me gently. "The moment I turned," I continued, "the moment I saw the water." My fingers tightened slightly around his hand again. "It doesn't stop." My voice broke at the end. Because it didn't. It replayed again and again inside me, like something I could no longer close my eyes against. Every version of it ending the same way, every version arriving too late. A long silence followed. Then the nurse spoke softly. "Sometimes the mind keeps returning to what it cannot change." I almost laughed at that. Not because it was comforting, but because it was true in a way that felt unbearable. "What do I do with that?" I asked quietly. There was no immediate answer. Because there wasn't one. The room remained still. My hand still in his. My life divided into before and after, with no bridge between them. At some point, I leaned forward again, resting my forehead near his hand like I had done before. It was the only position that felt even slightly bearable. "I don't know how to go back," I whispered. The words weren't meant for anyone anymore. Just for the space between us. "I don't know how to be anything after this." My breath shook. Because that was the truth I had been circling without nomming it. Not just loss, but change. Irreversible change. Footsteps moved quietly in the background, but no one interrupted me now. The room had learned its silence. I stayed like that for a long time. Until my body stopped resisting the stillness. Until my thoughts slowed into something heavier, quieter. Not peace. Not acceptance. Just exhaustion. And love that had nowhere left to go but memory. Eventually, I lifted my head again. I looked at him one more time. Really looked. Not through panic. Not through denial. Just through everything I now understood. You were my whole day, I whispered. My voice barely held. My every morning, my every night. A pause. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. The apology didn't change anything. But I said it anyway. Because there was nothing else left that still felt like mine to give. I leaned back slowly, still holding his hand, still refusing to let go completely. And in that quiet room, surrounded by people who were there but not really part of my world anymore, I understood something without it being spoken. This was the moment my life stopped being divided into hours and started being divided into everything I would remember and everything I could never return to. The room stayed quiet for a long time after that. Not empty quiet, never empty anymore, but full of everything that had already happened and could not be undone. I sat there holding his hand the same way I had since the beginning, as if my grip alone could keep time from moving forward again. But time did move, even if I didn't want it to. At some point, a soft knock came at the door. I didn't react at first. My mind had grown slow, heavy, like it no longer trusted the outside world to matter. A familiar voice spoke gently. "Ma'am, it's time to say goodbye." The word goodbye landed differently this time. Not like a sudden shock. Not like breaking glass. But like something that had been waiting all along for me to finally understand it. I didn't answer immediately. I just looked at him. Really looked. His face was still peaceful. Still the same child I had held, kissed, called, laughed with. And yet everything I had once associated with life had quietly stepped away from him, leaving only memory behind. My fingers tightened around his hand one last time. "I don't know how to do this," I whispered. My voice was barely there. A nurse stepped closer, not rushing me, just standing nearby like support without pressure. "You don't have to do it perfectly," she said softly. "Just in your own way." In my own way. What did that even mean now? I slowly leaned forward again, pressing my forehead near his hand. My eyes closed for a moment, not to escape, but because I couldn't hold the sight and the truth together anymore. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Not once. Not twice. But like a breath I could no longer stop. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Each word carried a different moment. The phone call. The smile. The distraction. The silence I ignored. When I finally opened my eyes again, I didn't stand up right away. I stayed there, memorizing him one last time in a way I knew would never feel complete, no matter how long I looked. Then, slowly, I let my fingers loosen. Not suddenly. Not violently. Just slowly. As if my body was trying to understand something my heart still refused. His hand remained still. Mine moved away. And the space between them became the most painful thing I had ever seen. I stood up on unsteady legs. The room felt larger now, too large, like everything had expanded around the emptiness he left behind. I took one step back, then another. My eyes never left him. Because I was afraid that if I looked away even once, I would lose the last image of him I would ever have. At the doorway, I stopped. My hand touched the frame. I didn't want to leave. Not the room. Not him. Not this moment where everything still felt connected, even in loss. But I also knew something I hadn't been able to accept until now. Staying didn't change anything anymore. I looked at him one final time. And for the first time, I spoke not to the room, not to the people, but directly to him. "Wait for me," I whispered. My voice cracked. "I don't know how to live this yet, but I will carry you with me." A long silence followed. Then I turned away. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. The door closed behind me with a soft sound I would never forget. And as I stepped into the hallway again, the world outside did not stop. It kept going, but I didn't feel like I was in it anymore. Only beside the memory of what I had lost, and the silence that would now follow me everywhere I went.